Sorry. Here we go. Yes, I thought I'd tap the mic open, and I haven't. So anyway, as occasionally you see my lips move, and no sound comes out. Hopefully there's some sound coming out now. Those who can lip read will have known what I've said. Anyway, once again, I'm Keith Hayes. This is East Sussex. This is Lewis, and we're broadcasting from Battle to Brighton, but also, because it's the World Wide Web, to various people in other parts of the world who are interested in what we have to say and what happens in this part of the world. Now, the whole country is in despair at the moment at the juvenile tactics and behaviour of our politicians. I am really worried that they are rapidly breaking rule of law. They are not following the diktats of the British unwritten constitution, I may say. They are ignoring anything that is laid down, and our laws of this country are governed by various decrees, not like the United States by a point-by-point constitution. So it's sometimes difficult to know whether, in fact, rule of law has disappeared or not, or is being broken. But it's my view that so many things have been ignored on precedent in the House of Commons and in government that rule of law really is going out of the window, and people are twisting and turning and doing whatever they like just to satisfy whatever they've decided and whatever they believe, and the rest of us can go to hell. But you know, the trouble is that when leaders behave like that, then quite a lot of people follow. And it doesn't seem unusual to me that the crime rate is beginning to climb. Knife, is it 20, 22, 23 knife crimes reported a day across the country. Youngsters out of control. Trolls on the internet yelling blue murder because they don't like what somebody else has said. People killing wantonly simply because they don't like what they see other people doing on the internet. It seems to me that unless somebody gets a real grip that the country is I forget what the phrase is, going to hell on a cart or something of the sort, but this unseemly fight that's going on, I don't care whether you're for Brexit, against Brexit, into Brexit, out of Brexit, or whatever. It's what's happening to the country. The vote split families and friends on the referendum, and now what's happening in Westminster, because it isn't being led properly, it isn't being done according to the rule of law, is spreading across the entire nation. So that the Britain I remember and am fond of, and I don't blame some people who say they're abandoning ship and going somewhere else, ceases to exist. If somebody doesn't actually get a grip, that's the way that we open up the doors to dictatorship. Can't happen in Britain? I always argued that. But I tell you, an opportunist who moves in, much as Hitler did, under the guise of democracy, could very quickly turn this country into something that we wouldn't recognise and we wouldn't want. So get a grip. Rule of law. Because if you don't follow rule of law, the rest of us won't follow rule of law. And once that happens, you have a complete and chaotic breakdown of society. When a 12-year-old girl can be raped on a bus. I come from the Midlands, so King's Standing, I know, isn't necessarily a rough area. In King's Standing, 6 or 8 men forced themselves on this 12-year-old girl, and apparently with some of her friends there as well. That can happen in the UK? I've read about things like that in India, and I've heard people say going tut, tut, tut. I've seen the stories about bodies turning up in various parts of Southeast Asia where people have dared to go alone and have been taken on by wanton criminals in the lonelier parts of these countries. Tut, tut, tut. But now it's happening here. And with a knife man who decides he just pick 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, does it matter? At random, to stick a knife into. And the only answer so far is to come up and say, if it carries a sentence of less than a year, don't bother to throw them into jail. And anyway, the jails are now being turned into places where the prisoners call, or the prisoners are called sir by the warders, and are given keys to their own cell. I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm an old right-wing Luddite. But I do believe that the operetta had got it right. Make the punishment fit the crime. Yes, there were excesses in our past history. Yes, of course, reform has to come along. Yes, of course, we've got to reform. But we don't seem to be cautious about it, and we don't seem to follow things with any sort of strategy. We try a bit here and a bit there. And if that works, oh. But you know, in between time, real people who are trying hard to lead a normal life are affected by these decisions. So please, come on, leaders, show some leadership. And I'm not just talking about Westminster, I'm talking about locally too. We've got an election coming up on May the 2nd. And I was just scanning through Lewis Eye, and I would commend that website to you. Lewis Eye does a very good investigative job, although, in fairness, I must say that when they concentrated on half a dozen things, they were very, very good. Now they've expanded, as indeed one should, and there are some things that perhaps they're finding they're doing too much. I would much rather see them focus, which they do spectacularly, in a very, very competent investigative way, on fewer issues and really give us the background than try to cover a whole host of issues because they are simply there. We've fallen into that trap too, and it's an easy trap to fall into. If an issue is there and somebody says, Keith, what are you going to do about that? Or have you said anything about this? As you tend to go and chase it, instead of perhaps focusing on one or two issues and making sure that you're effective in a media way to try and help change. Now, one of the things that really bothers me is the use of computers. Computers, of course, are absolutely essential to our way of life. They become absolutely necessary. The trouble is that the computer is not being monitored. It isn't being used sensibly by the people who install it, whether that be banks, or whether it be the local council, or any other organisation for that matter, is let the computer do it. The computer is only as good as the stuff that's put in it. And after that, it will regurgitate that. It doesn't actually think for itself, although I understand there are a couple of computers that started to talk to each other and the scientists who were with them couldn't understand it. They created a language of their own so they could have a little chat without anybody knowing what they were saying. I find that absolutely hilarious, except it's also pretty frightening. But, you know, computers, for instance, I mean, the hub, which is the NHS system, it continues to send out letters to people to go to an appointment, which was yesterday. Well, that's not using computers sensibly. That's just letting the computer run free. I think somebody somewhere has got to set up either a commission or an investigation panel, or even perhaps the computer manufacturers start to say, this is a sensible way to use our product. Because at the moment it's not a sensible way. It is just nonsense. It's you know, you can get a payment bounced because it's a penny out. Computer doesn't recognise that you're only a penny out. People do. And there's got to be a happy balance between looking at what the computer does and what people are doing and how they can help. There's one vote in the House of Commons. Well, I'm not sure that the computer had much to do with that, but it is indicative of the fact that computers simply do not have the capacity to apply common sense. Right. What I've been saying is probably humans don't at the moment either. So perhaps, after all, the computers are reflecting our society. But if computers are going to be helpful and really help to run a good community, good systems, good businesses, there is a different approach going to have to be taken than just inputting and then letting the computer run free. It's rubbish, it's nonsense, and somebody needs to take a strong look at it. I didn't come out of the computer era. I can remember when somebody showed me a computer and it filled 2 rooms. I said, can't see that catching on. But then I was very fortunate enough to meet a chap at Harland and Wolff, the shipbuilders in Belfast, who was an IT expert and ran their IT department. And he explained, and this was way back in the 80s, that we would all be carrying a mainframe computer in our pockets. Well, of course, we all are. We call it iPhones, smartphones, or whatever. We're all carrying mainframe computers, and magnificent, marvelous things they are. But fortunately, with my mini computer, I make it do what I want it to do. And if, in fact, it gives me something that does things that I don't want it to do, I simply tap, and away the app or the program goes, and I don't have to put up with it. But that's not happening in big business. Nobody is taking a look and saying, let's tap the app. That's not a bad catchword, is it? Tap the app. If you don't like what a computer is doing, get rid of the program and see if you can find another one. That's what we do all the time. And I mean, I'm not computer savvy. I'm not computer literate. I'm too old for it. But at least I know that if something is doing the job for me, I should keep it and use it. And if it's not doing the job for me, get rid of it. And surely that's not a bad thing for business and local government and senior government to start to do. Let's put computers in their place. Tap the app. Yeah, funny sort of rant this morning, wasn't it? But you know, that's what happens when despair takes over, as it has taken over the country. Who am I to say despair is ruling? Well, you don't have to go very far down our high street to find out how upset and disappointed people are, and how uncertain they feel, and how frightened they are, and how they wish that somebody would get a grip. Till tomorrow, Keith Hayes, Mirador Television, Toodle Pip.